Part 5. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 41. At 3 o'clock in the morning, shopkeeper's son put a rag on his shoulder and cleared away the wine bowls and dishes on the table. From time to time, he glanced at Su Buling and Ning Qingyi, dressed in white, leading a black horse in the warm sunshine of the bluestone alley. Fading away. Shopkeeper's son shook his head with a smile, and then sighed a little sadly. In the blink of an eye, another generation has passed. Whether it is in the court or in the world, there is always a new generation replacing the old, even the ordinary people in this alley. Shopkeeper's son has been running a liquor store in an alley all his life and has seen a lot of human kindness. As for the handsome men and beautiful women who meet by chance outside, he has seen too many. Judging from shopkeeper's son's experience, when a prodigal son meets a rich and powerful daughter, the outcome is likely to be a tragedy. They were not from the right family, and half of them eloped without trace, just like a scholar who went to Beijing to take the exam and met a wealthy daughter. On the other hand, most of the heroines of the Jianghu who meet the sons of aristocratic families eventually get married. Most of the women in the world are fierce, but the children of aristocratic families have been taught to be gentle and elegant since childhood. When women are strong and men are weak, if they want to start chaos and give up, they have to weigh their 3 legs. The pair of young people in their prime before them seem to be a perfect match. However, judging from the character of the two people, the man has much deeper thoughts. If his intentions are not right, the girl will probably suffer a big loss. But shopkeeper's son could see clearly what the man's character was like. Hearing about the injustice at the wine table, he walked away with his sword without saying a word. He walked through mountains of swords and seas of blood just to feel more comfortable drinking from the bowl of turbid wine in his hand. Among scholars, this is called a gentleman. In the world of martial arts, he is called a knight, and among the neighbors, he is called a damn good person. Shopkeeper Lu looked up and saw that the two people had disappeared deep into the alley, and sighed softly. It's a pity that in this world, good people may not be rewarded well. Love, hate, and hatred are always connected together, and they cannot escape even if they enter the world. The down-and-out scholar who stayed overnight in the wine shop before was also a good old man. His mind was full of learn martial arts and repay the emperor's family. He had to remember clearly how many bowls of rice he had in the wine shop every day, and ran there before leaving. When selling calligraphy, one must also pay off the credit account. Such a person finally fell in front of the world, became depressed, his wife died, and such a good daughter also turned against her. It is a pity and lamentable. I can only blame God for not being wise. While shopkeeper's son was thinking, another customer came outside the wine shop. The old woman wearing a magpie tail flower hairpin, carrying a bamboo basket, walked out of the wine shop in a daze, without any of the familiarity she had in the past, and her eyes were only empty. Shopkeeper's son was stunned. Sister, what's wrong with you? It's like you have lost your soul. The old woman came back to her senses, with tears hanging from the corners of her wrinkled eyes. She hesitated for a long time before saying in despair, Lao Zhang is gone, come here and buy him a bottle of wine. He has the best drink in his life. Ouch. Old man's son was anxious, wiped his hands with a towel and came out. Master Zhang is in such good health, how could he? Oh, come in quickly, sit down, and say. The old woman sat down in the shop with a basket and said with dull eyes, a few days ago, Lao Zhang took a job. It seemed that he was going to Bama village to help people look after homes and nursing homes. Who would have thought? Alas, I told him earlier that the Jianghu people would have to die outside sooner or later, and asked him to step down and give the martial arts school to his disciples, but he didn't listen, so now it's better, you. Old man's son frowned. He naturally knew what happened at Bama village 2 days ago. Sankei had no family members, so he found someone to bury the body, but he didn't expect. Well. Sun Zhangkai sat down on the bench opposite and was silent for a long time, but had nothing to say. The old woman is from Chang'an, and Master Zhang comes from Yuzhou, and has also been drinking in his shop for decades. There are many people who come to Chang'an City for mixed martial arts training. When they first come here, they are all full of ambition and want to make a name for themselves in Chang'an City with their fists. But the most important thing in Chang'an City is talented people, and even a genius can find two similar ones in the city. But if a man in the world wants to stand firmly at the feet of the emperor, his skill alone is obviously not enough. He must fawn over those who should be cured, and those who are Philistines must be Philistines. He has his wife, children, and young children, so there is no need for pleasure and grudges. If you use people's money to eliminate disasters for others, and eventually get killed, you can only blame yourself for not being as good as others. However, if he hadn't taken Sankei in at first, if Prince Su hadn't rewarded him with that ingot of silver, and if he hadn't let Sankei save the silver, maybe it wouldn't have been such a big deal. But who knew before it happened? No matter how bad the world is, we can't blame the good people who do good things. Shopkeeper's son waited for the old woman to finish crying. After thinking for a long time, he went back to the back room and took out a bag of silver and gave it to the helpless old woman. Now, except for the dead, everyone should feel more comfortable. After shopkeeper's son sent the old woman out, he shook his head and sighed, then started clearing the wine table again. At noon, Su Buling drove his horse to the corner tower of Daifang. Gulan gambling house has not yet opened its doors, and the winter sun is very warm. Many naughty idlers gathered in front of the brazier of the tea stall, listening to the storyteller telling anecdotes from all over the world. The story of Daio's martial arts is deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. In the absence of media channels such as radio and television, the most popular stories are naturally the stories of Jianghu heroes from all over the country, who eliminate harm for the people and kill one person for 100, and those who listen to it are excited. But in reality, the world of Jianghu is not as glamorous as what the storyteller said. In Su Buring's view, it is nothing more than success and fame when you stand, and nothing when you lie down, that's all. Su Buling led the horse to a tea stall. He looked up and saw Zhu Manzi, who had changed into new clothes, standing beside a tea stall and watching. The brand on his waist was replaced by a bronze medal from Tianzi camp, which was as bright as gold. The officers, soldiers, and warriors passing by all looked respectfully in their eyes. Zhu Manzi used to sit at the tea stall with his chin propped up while listening to storytelling, but now he has become a wolf guard of the Tianzi camp with a transcendent status. He enjoys the salary of the 7th grade military rank. Naturally, he can no longer pretend to be a man. He has no formal appearance and stands upright. He pressed the knife on his waist with his hands, and he looked really heroic. Best wishes, girl. Su Buling walked up to him and called out. Zhu Manzi's eyes lit up, and the serious expression just now disappeared. He turned around and ran over in a hurry, looking up and down with his big eyes. Mr. Su, you're finally here. Were you okay last time? I saw you got punched and wanted to see you, but the palace was too big and I didn't dare to go in. Su Buling smiled peacefully, what can I do? Let's go and find a quiet place. Zhu Manzi nodded, hesitantly took the reins from Su Buling's hand and followed him, then took off the bronze medal from his waist and shook it. Last time, I got most of the credit for the big case in Bama village. I was directly promoted to Tianwei camp. I ranked 8th in Tianzi camp, which is amazing. Brothers from Daiza camp had to wait at least 10 years to get to Tianzi camp. I entered Tianzi camp not long after I arrived, and they all said that I was a loser. Good luck. Good luck is also a skill, don't you think so, Prince Su? The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 42. That's natural. Su Buling nodded, but don't shake me out. If anything happens, just put a high hat on Xiaoting's head. Anyway, they don't dare to go to the Prime Minister's house to check. Zhu Manzi nodded like a chicken pecking rice, hung the bronze medal back on his waist, and smiled. After entering the Emperor's camp, you can go to the archives to check the files. Once you find out the whereabouts of my father, I will stop being a policeman and work as a guard for young Master Su. Su Buling raised his eyebrows. Miss Zhu, are you sure you are working as a guard for me and not looking for a backer for yourself? Zhu Manzi was already quite familiar with life, and said with a smile, young master helped me such a big favor, I have to repay you, right? Young master has family property in 12 states, and he doesn't care about money. He can only be a guard. Don't dislike it, that's it? Su Buling shook his head and chuckled, don't say whether these are available or not, have you entered the record library? Zhu Manzi became a little more serious and felt a little disappointed. When we went in, the case library was very big. The bookshelves containing the files were several feet high. There were hundreds of bookshelves stacked together. My parents abandoned me last year. I ran away from home. At that time, there seemed to be trouble in the Fenhe area, and several gang leaders were killed. I found the case records in the case file library. Unfortunately, the case has not been solved until now, and I can't find the murderer at all. Su Buling frowned, isn't that all the hard work in vain? Zhu Manzi nodded listlessly, if this method doesn't work, I can only find a martial artist of similar age to my father. I don't know how powerful my father is. There are hundreds of masters named Zhu in the archives, and I don't know how to find them until when. Don't be anxious. The Criminal Investigation Department monitors the world. Basically, famous figures from all over Daio cannot escape the eyes of the Criminal Investigation Department. They will eventually be found if you investigate slowly. Su Buletinling comforted him with a few words. Zhu Manzi nodded with a thought for a moment and then said, by the way, Mr. Su, I even went out of my way to find out the news about Dragon Locking Gu, but Dragon Locking Gu disappeared more than 10 years ago, and there are only cases in the archives. The record has no source or solution. Su Buletinling raised his eyebrows lightly, with a bit of surprise, you are serious about it, are you sure you have read it all? Zhu Manzi shook his head, a little embarrassed, the archives store some secrets of the princely family, which cannot be seen everywhere. There is also a small library in the archives, which is specially used to store important case files. Several of them the chief officer stays inside all year round. If the case involves the things inside, Mr. Zhang will take people in to check, and no one will be allowed to go in alone. Su Buling thought for a moment, sneak in. Zhu Manzi kicked the pebbles on the ground with his hands behind his back, looking a little listless. Of course I wanted to sneak in and take a look, but Mr. Zhang is inside. If I were caught sneaking in, something big would happen. Su Buring chuckled lightly, it's simple. I'll call Zhang Xiang out and hold him back. You can find an opportunity to go in and check the files. By the way, see if there is any record of the Dragon Locking Gu. Zhu Manzi pursed his lips and hesitated for a moment, Mr. Su, it is a serious crime to break into the case library and you may lose your head, I am timid. Su Buling shook his head, I am the eldest son of Prince Su. If the incident really comes to light, you will say that you have a very good relationship with me and that you only rushed in to find your father. No one can touch you while I am here. Zhu Manzi thought about it for a moment, then smiled, okay, I believe Mr. Su. A gentleman's words are hard to catch. On the other side, the quarry outside Chang'an City. The towering buildings in Chang'an City are spread out one after another, so the consumption of stone materials must be huge. There are no railway transportation lines in Daio, and it is too extravagant for merchant ships to transport stones, so they usually use local materials. Without the help of explosives, quarrying is not an easy job. In the cold winter months, Countless corvées wear single clothes and use iron hammers to break open huge rough stones at the bottom of the mountain wall. Most of the corvées are skinny. If they are lazy, there will be an overseer with a whip. Scold. In a small house outside the quarry, which had just been converted into a study, the smell of paint still lingered. The carved soft couch is placed under the window, and in a blink of an eye, you can see the busy laborers outside. Li Tianlu was dressed in civilian clothes, sitting on the couch playing with a paper knife in his hand, his eyes showing undisguised annoyance and gloom. The servants stayed outside in silence. It was said that Li Tianlu came to do corvée as a punishment, but the Li family's status in Chang'an City was definitely not bad. They came here in the prison car honestly just to show off, so as not to offend the courtiers and the emperor. But if he really wanted the legitimate son of the Li family to go and eat with a group of corvées, even thinking about it, he knew it was impossible. After 2 days here, the house has been tidied up by the quarry clerks. Li Tianlu waited for a moment on the soft cave, and then a carriage stopped in the quarry. The Imperial Forest Army opened the way, and the Zhonyang Marquis Li Beiyi in regular clothes quickly entered the room, turned around and closed the door. Father. Li Tianlu stood up, slightly restrained the anger on his face, and asked softly. Dad, when can I return to Chang'an City? Li Beiyi walked up to him with his hands behind his back and said calmly. Don't think about it these 2 months. It's when the limelight is at its peak. If someone grabs the handle, you'll be on the edge of the knife. Li Tianlu knew this truth, so he could only wait for the news to pass and the courtiers and the people to forget about it, so that he could have the opportunity to sneak back and continue to be his son of the Li family. The Li family, the dignified leader of the street, had finally built a prosperous business in Bama village. Now that it was blocked by the authorities, Li Tianlu was naturally angry. This Xiaoting, I used to treat him like an elder brother, but I never thought he would be so disrespectful. Li Beiyi shook his head. We can't afford to offend the Huainan Xiao family, but we must not let the female head catcher off. The wolf guard didn't say hello in advance. It must be the female head catcher who made her own decisions, or was bewitched by the Xiao family, so she dared to be too old. Breaking the news. Li Tianlu's eyes showed a bit of chill. Send someone now. Hey, Li Beiyi raised his hand to stop Li Tianlu's words. Don't be impatient. Something happened in Bama village. If the female detective died now, a fool would think that it was my Li family who did it. Make arrangements first. Manpower, the news in Bama village will be suppressed in a few days, and the work will be done more cleanly to prevent future troubles. Li Tianlu couldn't suppress the anger in his heart, but he also knew that revenge was too conspicuous at this time, so he could only snort. It's too easy to kill her. If she falls into my hands. Humph, anyone who goes against my Li family is already dead. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 43. Time flies and it is the first day of the 12th lunar month. As the year is coming to an end, Chang'an is getting busier. Dayu broke Chang'an on the first day of the 12th lunar month a year ago. At that time, the battle with Daqi was a fight to the death. More than 100,000 people died on both sides. The suburbs outside Chang'an were full of old horses, but no living people were seen. After Emperor Xiaozong entered Chang'an, the world was settled. He specially dug a tomb of heroes beside Qujiang Lake. The remains of the soldiers from both sides were buried in it, announcing the end of the 3 kingdoms that lasted for 100 years. From now on, they are all citizens of Dayu. Countless wives who waited for their husbands to return home, after waiting for a long time without any news, would come here from thousands of miles every year. Some committed suicide by jumping into Qujiang Lake, and some cried to death in front of the tomb of heroes. This lasted for more than 10 years, so Emperor Xiaozong had to send many officials to wait by the Tomb of Heroes to comfort these women who had lost everything, and specially asked the queen to pay homage to the Tomb of Heroes every year. Nowadays, the things before Jiazi have become the past, but the habit of burning incense at Qujiang Lake on the first day of the 12th lunar month has not changed, but it has evolved into a festival mainly for enjoying the snow scenery, just like the Dragon Boat Festival to worship Chu Yuan, which can be regarded as a festival born out of necessity. However, the current emperor has not appointed another queen after the death of the queen, and the task of bringing the imperial concubine here fell on the head of the current Empress Dowager. As the daughter-in-law of the Xiao family, Madame Lu became a widow after getting married. Due to her reputation, she did not go out much and was not familiar with other wealthy ladies on Kuishao Street. In order to have someone to talk with at Qujiang Lake, she naturally brought Su Buling with her. Su Buling followed Madame Lu to Qujiang Lake, not only to relax, but also to make other arrangements. The Queen Mother took a group of wealthy ladies out of the city to enjoy the scenery, so the security work naturally could not go wrong. Su Buling secretly asked Ning Qingyi to make a gesture of scouting around Qujiang Lake, deliberately leaving some traces. After the detective department discovered Ning Qingyi's traces, they naturally did not dare to take it lightly. On the first day of the 12th lunar month, more than 100 wolf guards were sent to guard the surrounding area, and thousands of imperial guards were sent to clear the area around Qujiang Lake in advance. Except for some well-known ladies and local sages, no suspicious people were allowed to enter. Commander Zhang Xiang even went out with a knife in person to guard the Queen Mother. Zhang Xiang was lured out of his hole, and Zhu Manzi naturally took the opportunity to enter the case library under the pretext of checking the case files. However, there must be more than one Zhang Xiang stationed in the case library, so it is necessary to continue to create a little chaos in the investigation department. The morning of the first day of the 12th lunar month, the huge Su Palace was slightly tidied up at the request of Mrs. Lu. The 8 palace guards were originally dead soldiers, and Su Buling did not need them at ordinary times, so he made them hard-working little gardeners to prepare for the end of the year. The sky was just getting white, and snowflakes of moderate size were scattered in the courtyard. Su Buling was tidying up his clothes in front of the bronze mirror, because he was still going to sacrifice to the heroes in name, and there were many soldiers under his grandfather Su Lai. They were dressed more formally, but they did not need to wear crowns as they had not yet reached the age of 18. They were just more solemn brocade robes and jade belts. Old Xiao stood in front of him with a cane, talking about today's arrangements. There is a bamboo forest near Qujiang Pond, and you have to pass through it to get in and out. There are traps set in advance. Ning Qingyi will definitely not be able to kill Zhang Xiang. It will cause some chaos at that time. Whether she can retreat depends on her ability. Zhu Manzi will enter the case library at noon. It is just lunchtime. The number of patrolling wolf guards has been greatly reduced. I will try to create some chaos to distract the wolf guards. I have about half an hour to go in and check the files. Su Buling listened carefully. After confirming that there was no problem with the arrangement, he nodded gently, "Take the 8 guards with you just in case. If you get killed in there, I will be alone." Old Xiao laughed, "Don't worry, young prince. I have no other skills, but I am a first-class life-saving kung fu. According to the current situation, if the poison is not cured, I may be able to send you away first." Su Buling really couldn't refute it. He chuckled, took the sword from the carved tiger orchid, hung it on his waist, and walked out of the palace gate. The Kuishao Street, which has always been solemn, has a rare noise. Dozens of carriages came out of the mansions of various princes and generals, and servants and maids were in front and behind, and most of them were women. As a place where the top families in Chang'an City gather, even the noble ladies who are usually arrogant will honestly follow the rules and walk in the position they should occupy. This order of precedence does not need to be deliberately commanded, and it is all the result of generations of open and secret struggles. The carriage of the Xiao family was ahead. Xiao Chuiang's wife Kui had already left with her maids, while Madame Lu parked the carriage in front of the stone lions of the palace and waited. The light snow fell, and Su Buling led Zufeng Taz out of the palace gate. He looked up and saw Madame Lu, who was wearing a dark blue imperial robe, leaning against the window of the carriage and looking out. Her face was not made up, and her emerald green earrings were motionless. She looked like she was in a daze. Yunu held up a white oil paper umbrella to block the falling snow, and walked forward slowly and bowed, "Young prince, be careful of catching a cold in heavy snow, get in the carriage." Then she raised her hand and took the reins. The door was blocked, and Su Buling did not struggle in vain. After handing the horse to Yunu, he lightly stepped on the street and jumped into the carriage, entering the warm and gorgeous carriage. Mrs. Lu closed the window of the carriage, moved her hips slightly on the soft couch, and patted the seat next to her. "Buling, come sit here." The carriage was spacious, and there were seats for guests next to it. Su Buling had already sat down, so he had to get up and sit next to Mrs. Lu, taking off his sword and placing it on the small table next to him. "Aunt Lu, why were you in a daze just now? Are you worried about something?" Mrs. Lu lazily leaned on the soft couch, her eyes kept staring at Su Buling. "What can I have on my mind? All I can think about is you. I always feel that you are hiding something from me recently." Su Buling's face stiffened slightly, he shook his head and smiled. "Men have to have some personal matters, I have a sense of discretion." Mrs. Lu frowned, thought for a moment, moved a little closer, and smelled Su Buling's robe. Su Buling accepted it calmly. In the past few days, when he came into contact with women, he would rub off a layer of skin before returning home. If he could smell it, he would have nothing to say. Mrs. Lu didn't notice the femininity, her eyes finally became more energetic, and she said quietly, "What's going on with Miss Song? I heard from my servants that Song Jiju's daughter often hangs around the palace these days. It seems that I still want to come to you, huh? I also went to the Imperial College to inquire about it, and I heard that you were copying books in the Bell and Drum Tower, and that girl ran there every night." Su Buletinling's scalp was numb when he heard this resentful tone, but he couldn't talk nonsense to avoid making Mrs. Lu even more resentful. He could only shake his head and chuckle, "I don't want to copy the book and ask her to help me copy it. Songda Jiju is a teacher and has always been a strict tutor, how could Miss Song do something that is disgraceful to the family tradition?" This explanation was quite convincing. Mrs. Lu nodded slightly and said no more. She took out the chess pieces on the second floor of the chessboard from the side and went to Kujiang Pond while talking about the family's shortcomings. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 44. The detective department is located in Kongrenfang on the east side of the imperial city. Because the nobles in the palace are out of the city, most of the people in the yamen are already out on the streets and on standby. The yamen across the entire street seems a bit empty. The document warehouse behind the yamen occupies a large area. A high-rise building in the middle is guarded by wolf guards day and night. To enter, the wolf guards of Tianziying need to hold a bronze medal and the approval slip from the chief officer. In the early morning, Zhu Manzi took over the errand from the chief officer and went to the archives. She was transferred from the city patrol room to the arrest room and was affiliated with the Tianwei camp. However, last time Ning Qingyi killed 4 Tianwei camp wolf guards, leaving a manpower vacancy. She currently has no teammates and is still together with her 2 old partners. Lu Hou'er and Wang Dazhuang had been patrolling the streets for half a lifetime and still couldn't get into Tianzi camp. They were gangsters in the criminal investigation department, and they would definitely fawn over someone with a big leg in front of them. The 2 of them walked behind Zhu Manzi like followers and said earnestly, "Manzi, you have just entered the emperor's camp, so don't be too proud." The wolf guard does a job of licking blood from the edge of a knife. We have worked together for many years and have a lot of experience. We have a lot to teach you. Based on our relationship, I am sure tell everything you know and answer all questions. Zhu Manzi walked towards the case library with the knife on his waist and snorted lightly, "Give me back the money, and I will continue to treat you as brothers." In the past, Zhu Manzi patrolled the streets and gave all the money rewarded by the yamen to two old Yaut Iaos in order to praise her merits. Then her head was counted on her. Now she really wanted to get the money back. Lu Hoer's face was full of sadness when he heard this. "Manzi, talking about money hurts your feelings. If you didn't take care of us when you came to Chang'an, how could you have entered Tianzi camp so smoothly?" During the chat, outside the gate of the case library where Zhu Manzi came, the two principals were drinking tea and chatting in front of the case. Zhu Manzi received an old case of theft of an imperial horse from the yamen, which had never been solved. At this time, he took the approval slip and the bronze medal to the boss for inspection, then took off the summons fireworks, fire certificates, and other items, and entered the case alone. Library. Because the main force was transferred out of the city today, there were not many wolf guards stationed outside the archives. Zhu Manzi entered the case library with a calm expression. Rows of tall bookshelves were placed in the spacious hall. The windows were sealed and the light was dim because no open fire could be seen. Among them, 7 or 8 wolf guards were looking at the files. They were all written in the sky. There are famous masters in the camp. Normally it would be difficult for Zhu Manzi to even meet him, but now he had to nod and salute when he met him. The library is very quiet, even a little depressing. At the end of the central corridor is a small library, which was originally the office of the chief official. Today Zhang Xiang went to Qujiangpool, leaving only Deputy Envoy Lu Yunlin sitting in it. After Zhu Manzi glanced at it casually, he rummaged through the piles of bookshelves while waiting for the opportunity that he had discussed with Su Buling. In the wind and snow, the team of chariots and horses drew a thin line on the snowy field outside Chang'an City. Qujiangpool is located in the southeast corner of Chang'an City, not far away, and it was not yet noon when we arrived. The Queen Mother's royal chariot has arrived and is going to the tomb of the heroes on the side of Qujiangpool to offer sacrifices. The concubine, Lady Jiaoming, etc. are following her. The rules of a formal occasion are bound to be cumbersome, and if you don't have someone to keep up with it, you will definitely not be able to finish it. Mrs. Lu asked Su Buling to wait by the Qujiangpool first, and they would meet again later when they were having fun. In front of the waterside pavilion by the lake, Su Buling, dressed in white fox fur, held a fishing rod and hung into the Qujiang pond. The team of Yingying and Yanyan disappeared into the sea of bamboo under the escort of the Royal Forest Army. Only the maids and servants of each family were left in the pavilions by the Qujiangpool, busy preparing various items for the master to play later. When it was more convenient, the rich family even pulled a few boats to dock on the lake shore. The wolf guards walk 5 steps and patrol the lakeside carefully. If there is any possible movement, they will come forward to check and interrogate. It can be said that the guards are very tight. However, this waterside pavilion by Qujiang Pond was a place Su Buling bought for himself to fish. Naturally, no one would dare to disturb him here. After waiting for a moment to make sure no one was paying attention, Su Buling tapped twice on the floor of the waterside pavilion. Dong dong. There was a rustling sound from the house behind her, and Ning Qingyi walked out quietly, leaning against the corner of the house and taking a cautious look. Su Buling tilted his head. "I can only help you here. I have left you a way out. Girl, please remember to do what you can and don't be reluctant to fight." After a short period of self-cultivation, Ning Qingyi's complexion improved a lot at this time. She held her sword and nodded slightly. "Thank you, see you again when we are destined." After saying that, he didn't stay long, lowered his head and quickly walked out of the waterside pavilion,
heading to leave Qiu Zhangqi is waiting on the only road he must pass. Su Buling sat on the terrace of the waterside pavilion with a fishing rod in his hand. Since he was behind the scenes, he had nothing to do except wait for the results. It's still early, snowflakes are falling on the banks of Qujiang Pool, the lake is as flat as a mirror, the sky and the earth are silent, just like an ink painting. Thousands of koi fish jump out of the water from time to time, as if they want to catch the snow particles falling from the sky. The team offering sacrifices to the heroes hadn't returned yet, and the fish hadn't taken the bait yet. When Su Buring was bored, the sound of footsteps came from behind again. The steps were light and Su Buling could tell it was a woman. She thought that Ning Qingyi had run back without finding the chance. When she turned around, she saw Song Yufu, whom she hadn't seen for several days, sneaking towards this person. Bian came over. Because of the heavy snowfall, she wore a red cloak over her pine jade coat and a hood that covered her hair tightly. Only a green cheek was exposed. Even so, it was flushed with cold. From time to time, she put her hand in front of her mouth to breathe. Su Buling frowned. To be honest, he didn't like this female schoolgirl who was always causing trouble for him. He immediately turned his head back and continued to look at the lake. Miss Song came here uninvited, do you have something important to do? Song Yufu walked to the terrace lightly, bowed and saluted, and because of her guilty conscience, she was a little embarrassed and whispered, Su Shizi, I have something to say, I don't know if I should say it or not. Then don't say it, Su Buling replied coldly. Oh. Song Yufu's determination to confess was finally broken in an instant. She bit her lower lip and hesitated for a moment, but still did not say goodbye, but walked to the edge of the terrace and sat down. The purpose, of course, was to establish a good relationship with Su De Shizi in advance, so as not to settle accounts with her after the poetry incident was exposed. Su Buling didn't know what Song Yufu was thinking, and suddenly saw her sitting next to him, smiling foolishly, so he naturally thought of something wrong. Su Buling moved aside to keep his distance and raised his eyebrows. Miss Song, you don't really want to be a princess, do you? I used a ruler to beat you last time, but I didn't use my hands. If you blame me, I won't admit it. Song Yufu blinked her eyes, but she was not angry, but said seriously. Prince, don't joke. Last time, it was my misunderstanding that caused trouble for you. You should beat me. Well, I admire Prince Su's literary talent and moral character. I just want to make friends with you. Not to mention, the wording of this pickup is very straight. Su Buling opened his mouth and pondered for a moment. Boyfriend. Boyfriend, this word is so strange. Song Yufu hesitated for a moment and answered seriously, like-minded people are bosom friends. I can't chat with those young ladies from official families. On the contrary, I admire Su Shizi's talent and scheming, so I regard Su Shizi as, boyfriend. Wait. Su Buling felt something was wrong the more he listened. He felt funny and raised his eyebrows. Miss Song, I didn't agree, so you just treat me as your boyfriend. Song Yufu nodded slightly. I regard the prince as a bosom friend, why does he need to agree? If the prince also regards me as a friend, it would be the best. Why should I regard you as my girlfriend? Girlfriend. Song Yufu was a little confused, but didn't care so much. Her face was bitter and a little aggrieved. Not worthy. Su Buling looked up and down for a few times, and curled the corners of his mouth. As long as you are obedient and don't cause trouble for me, it's not impossible to treat you as my girlfriend reluctantly. Song Yufu nodded quickly. I'll be obedient, but no one is perfect. It's great to know your mistakes and improve them. As a boyfriend, you can't just turn your face. You must convince people with reason and virtue like a gentleman. I have always convinced people with virtue, martial virtue. Stop fighting and take benevolence and righteousness as your duty.
It's called martial virtue. The prince misunderstood. Song Yufu's great principles came one after another, and she didn't repeat them for a long time. Su Buling was bored anyway, so he didn't dislike it. He listened carefully to the girlfriend who was trying to influence him. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 45. In the case library, Zhu Manzi absent-mindedly flipped through various records of old cases, his eyes wandering around. Time passed little by little, and just after noon, the wolf guards on duty in the case library began to change shifts to eat. Only 4 of the wolf guards who were originally on guard were left to guard the exit. The chief clerk entered the case library carrying a food box, and the deputy Lu Yunlin walked out. He took the food box from the study and went back in, with no intention of leaving. A bell and drum sounded in the criminal investigation department. Zhu Manzi secretly calculated the time. It was almost as agreed, so he put down the case file and moved it to the corner of the bookshelf intentionally or unintentionally, avoiding the sight of others. Just as the gong sounded to announce the time, an extremely arrogant voice suddenly came from the detective department that encompassed the entire street. "Zhang Xiang, I'll hum your mother. How dare you call the criminal investigation department the Dragon Pond and Tiger's Den? Grandpa, I can come and leave as I please today. What do you mean to me?" The voice was hoarse, as if there was something stuck in the throat, but it carried far away, and almost everyone in the detective department could hear it. It was obvious that he was a master with amazing internal strength. Several wolf guards who were looking through the case files in the case library suddenly became alert, and they all looked in the direction of the sound. "Who's yelling? How dare you insult Mr. Zhang? His grandma's." Lu Yunlin, the deputy envoy who had been left behind, just walked out of the study room, furious. There are many ordinary gangsters who come to the capital, and there are even those who secretly carry out assassinations and sabotage every day. Is it the first time in history that anyone who dares to rush to the headquarters of the detective division to cause trouble in an open and honest manner? Is it impossible to be a wolf guard in the 36th Tiangang? Lu Yunlin's face was livid. He rushed out of the case library with his Yanling knife, and said angrily, "You've already knocked on the door, why are you still standing there? I'll cut him into pieces. Promise." The wolf guard, who was knocked on the door for the first time, came to his senses after being confused for a while. All of them were very angry. Going to the criminal investigation department to cause trouble is not like breaking ground on Tai Sui's head. This is simply digging up the ancestral grave of the king of hell. The detective department of Novo University suddenly went crazy. Hundreds of wolf guards showed off their various martial arts skills. The roofs and walls were full of people, rushing toward the source of the sound like a sea wave. The case library quickly emptied out. Zhu Manzi poked his head out from behind the bookshelf. After taking a quick look to make sure no one was there, he quickly ran to the door of the small library and slipped in quietly. The library inside the case library also stores case files, but it is much smaller than the one outside. A sliding staircase is placed next to the shelf. On the shelf are stacked cabinets, just like a drugstore. There are wooden signs on the cabinet doors, engraved with various logos. There are 3 desks in the center of the room, and behind the desk is a knife table. The room is large and seems a bit empty. You can see every corner at a glance, and there is no hiding place at all. According to the original agreement, Su Buling sent someone to distract the wolf guard, which could last up to half a quarter of an hour. Zhu Manzi had to restore everything to the original before the wolf guard came back, and time was very tight. Zhu Manzi's heart skipped a beat. The 16-year-old girl, no matter how courageous she was a little nervous at this moment, and she hurriedly searched in front of the bookshelf. Different from the large library outside, most of the records in this room are the words and deeds of certain princes and aristocratic families in recent years. Without exception, They are all secrets that cannot be disclosed due to various reasons. Although they are much less than outside, but there are at least 1,000 files on the 4 rows of bookshelves. Zhu Manzi knew that her father was good at martial arts, but she didn't know how high he was. However, as a daughter, she naturally thought that her father was very powerful. So after finding the bookshelf that recorded the Jianghu people, I pushed the ladder over directly, climbed to the top and opened the drawer of the heroes of the 4 directions. There were many booklets inside, with East China Si Lu Beiming written on the cover. Poison Master Li Hansheng and other characters she had never heard of. Zhu Manzi's surname was Zhu, and her father could never change his surname, so he picked up the pamphlets one by one and searched to see if there was anyone with the surname Zhu. He flipped through them from beginning to end, and he actually found a hero named Zhu. When he opened the pages it says, Operator Sword Zhu Zhoushan, the head of the Zhu family in Yueyang. His swordsmanship surpassed the Tang and Lu families during the Suen He period. During the Iron Eagle hunting period, he refused to obey the court's control and was jointly annihilated by the detective department and the Yuzhu Tang family. Zhuzhou all 47 men from the Shan and Zhu families were removed from the list, and after investigation, no omissions were found. Zhu Manzi frowned slightly. Suen He was the reign of the late emperor, and her father was only in his 30s. Moreover, the Zhu family was wiped out 10 years ago. 10 years ago, when she was 6 years old, she was farming with her father. Obviously not like her father. Zhu Manzi didn't have much time, so she rummaged around and couldn't find any record that matched her father's, so she had no choice but to look for the news about the dragon lock cup. She quickly pushed the ladder down to the cabinet of King Su's lineage and looked through it. The records about the ambush on the Weha River were no different from the rumors. So Zhu Manzi ran to the shelf where the world's strange poisons were piled, climbed up and searched among various records. It's a pity that there are so many evil poisons in the world, and there is no record of Changgu, when a loud roar comes from outside. The detective department is nothing more than that. Grandpa takes the first step. The voice was far away and had already left the detective department. Zhu Manzi knew that this was a reminder that she couldn't hold on any longer, so she could only grit her teeth, put the booklet away intact, and ran out of the study room quickly. Dong dong dong. Boots stepped on the wooden floor of the document warehouse, and the wolf guards who went out to hunt returned one after another, and cursed voices came. Who is this charlatan? He roars so loudly that he can run faster than a mouse. Who knew that he would dare to go to the entrance of the detective department and act so brazenly? If he is not caught, other yeomen will find out and will be laughed at to death. Ask all the remaining wolf guards to go out and check for me. Even if they dig 3 feet into the ground, they have to find it for me. Lu Yunlin, deputy envoy of the Criminal Investigation Department, was filled with anger. He held the Yanling knife and pushed open the door of the small library. The room was empty and everything was the same as when he left. But to be the second in command in the Criminal Investigation Department of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, no one is good at it. Lu Yunlin was about to put the Yanling knife back on the knife stand when he suddenly stopped, frowned, and sniffed the air, and then turned around suspiciously. The inner warehouse is extremely empty, with no windows on all sides and it is airtight. If someone comes in, there will definitely be an aura that ordinary people cannot detect. Lu Yunlin noticed something was wrong, his face darkened, he took out the book from his arms, walked to the surrounding bookshelves, and looked carefully at each cabinet door. The weak firelight shone on the red lacquer cabinet door, which was as smooth as a mirror. He looked at it one by one until vague fingerprints appeared on the cabinet door of the world's strange poison. Lu Yunlin's eyes narrowed slightly, then he searched and saw the mark on the door of the cabinet where King Su's files were displayed. King Su, strange poison. Lu Yunlin pondered for a while, then quickly took out his handkerchief and wiped off all the traces on the cabinet door. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 46. The tomb of the martyrs on the south side of Qujiangpool is a hill shaped like a mound. There are ancestral halls and Taoist temples built outside, and an iron ox was also specially made by melting iron tools, which roughly means forging swords into plowshares, stopping fighting into weapons. It has been there for 60 years and is still as black and shiny as new. Someone wipes it and adds incense every day. While Zhu Manzi sneaked into the case library to steal secrets, Ning Qingyi, who was responsible for attracting hatred and attracting firepower, also lurked in the bamboo forest for a long time, waiting for Zhang Xiang to appear, but waiting for Zhang Xiang was not that easy. Zhang Xiang didn't come here just to settle his old grudges with Ning Qingyi. There were many people who had grudges against Zhang Xiang. As the external face of the Criminal Investigation Department, Zhang Xiang didn't have much free time to chat with people in the world. He came here in person just because of suspicion. There are Jianghu thieves lurking near Qujiangpool, coming to protect the safety of the Queen Mother. Naturally, the Queen Mother did not know about Ning Qingyi's existence. She finally left the palace, and it was impossible for her to return to the palace after paying homage. After coming out of the Tomb of the Heroes, she went directly to the observation deck beside Qujiangpool. Zhang Xiang took watch the wolf guards patrol around the observation deck. The Queen Mother is the legitimate daughter of the Xiao family and the youngest sister of Prime Minister Xiao Chuiang. The wives of several wealthy families in Kuishao Street are all from the Xiaolu Kui Wang Li and other prestigious families, and they have known each other since childhood. Su Buling's mother is the daughter of the Donghai Lu family, and she was originally in the same circle as these ladies. It's a pity that the Donghai Lu family was on the wrong side 10 years ago, and now it has become a worldly family with no one to talk to in the court. The Jinling Lu family of Yuan dynasty was also implicated. Mrs. Lu's father, Lu Changgan, was supposed to be among the 3 princes, but so far he is at the bottom among the 3 princes and 9 ministers, and his right to speak is very weak. Of course, the secret conflicts between major aristocratic families will not be reflected in the daughters who get married. The Queen Mother came out with a group of ladies to finish the business, and the conversation was still about the shortcomings of ordinary people's parents. The observation deck beside Qujiangpool is a tall building with many calligraphy treasures left by famous artists. In a hall on the 3rd floor, more than a dozen dignified ladies were sitting inside. Many official ladies and princesses stood behind and looked familiar. The maids were carefully serving tea and pouring water. The atmosphere was more serious than the previous court. Everyone was "I don't want to make a mistake in front of others if I say something wrong." The Queen Mother was dressed in golden clothes and a phoenix crown. She sat on the soft couch at the top, holding a teacup and listening quietly with a half-smiling expression. A woman who can enter the palace as a queen is definitely one of a kind in appearance in addition to her birth status. Among the dozen or so charming and mature women present, there is definitely not one with bad looks, but the Queen Mother has the bonus of temperament and status, and she is gorgeous. If you look at Peony, you will obviously outshine everyone else, and you will feel a bit lonely and beautiful. Because she was a widow, Mrs. Lu never dressed up to stand out in front of outsiders. She didn't have many accessories and was as quiet as hibiscus. She just sat in the back and drank tea alone, which didn't attract anyone's attention. There were so many wealthy ladies present, some were cold and beautiful women who did not like the fireworks of the world, and naturally there were also social butterflies who fawned over everyone. The head of the Zhang family in Kuishao Street was ranked among the 9th ministers in the Sheofu. He climbed up through the imperial examination and was born into a poor family. His wife, Mrs. Gao, is the eldest daughter of a family. She is considered a high-ranking family in the marketplace, but she is a bit unworthy in this room, so she is the most enthusiastic and flattering to everyone. When a woman talks,
she cannot avoid mentioning her children and nephews. I don't know who mentioned that the eldest son of the Xiao family has great perseverance and went to a poor mountain to become a county magistrate at a young age. The Queen Mother suddenly became a little happy, and she was obviously very satisfied with what she said. Seeing this, Mrs. Gao quickly took advantage of every opportunity and began to praise. Dalan of the Xiao family has had outstanding character since he was a child. Everyone in Chang'an City knows it, so why do we need to comment on it? On the other hand, Xiao Ting, the second son of the Xiao family, is usually quiet, but a few days ago he made a sensation and made people admire him. Many women nodded and agreed. Although the Xiao family is the most powerful family in Huainan, there are not many true direct descendants. After Xiao Chuang came to Beijing to pay homage to the Prime Minister, his elder brother died of illness and left only an only son. Xiao Chuang adopted the son under his knees and raised him. Unexpectedly, he still had nothing to do with it. He could live beyond 20 years old, but he would die young just after getting married. Nowadays, only Xiao Chuang, the direct descendant of the principal family, is left in the Huainan Xiao family. Even the head of the family can only let the Queen Mother's sister sit in charge. It can be said that there is no one to take over. If it weren't for this, a fool like Xiao Ting would have been kicked out of the house long ago, and there would be no support for him like stars holding the moon in his arms. As the daughter of the Xiao family, the Queen Mother naturally hopes that her nephew will succeed, and she smiled even more when she heard these words. Mrs. Gao became even more excited when she saw this. In a blink of an eye, she saw Mrs. Lu sitting behind her and continued. In the past, the masters in the Imperial College said that Xiao Ting and Prince Su were incompetent. I think that with Mrs. Lu and the Queen Mother in charge of the two young masters, they are incompetent. They are just not old enough. I heard that the dragon poetry recital a few days ago, Su Shizi also became a blockbuster and wrote a good poem. This can be regarded as exaggerating the Xiao family and the Lu family, and at the same time complimenting Prince Su, trying to please him on three sides. But Mrs. Lu didn't want to accept this sentiment. After hearing this, she put down her teacup and interjected. Mrs. Gao, don't listen to rumors. They are all spread by those scholars. Su Buling of the Longyin Poetry Society did not admit that the highly respected scholar present could not pin the original author of The Wind Dwells in the Dust and the Fragrant Flowers Are Gone on Su Buling's head, so he could only end it with suspicion, and there was no certainty that the matter would spread far. The Queen Mother has lived in the palace for a long time. Unless others tell her, she naturally does not know what happened that day. After hearing this, she asked curiously. What poems did Xiao Buling write? Mrs. Gao thought Mrs. Lu was being modest, so she nodded with understanding and said. The wind has settled in the dust and the fragrance of the flowers has faded. I am tired of combing my hair in the day and night. Things are different and people are not in the same place. Everything is gone. If I want to speak, I will shed tears first. All the ladies present were from high-ranking families. The first time they heard the beautiful words of this eternal song, they felt refreshed. Now when they heard it again, they slowly nodded their heads with admiration. The official ladies behind them even had stars in their eyes. The Queen Mother is the legitimate daughter of the Xiao family, and her attainments in poetry are not bad. She only listened to a few words before she became serious. The late emperor passed away just after she entered the palace, and she stayed alone in the palace day and night. When she heard this poem that vividly described her feelings, she was naturally moved. After Gao finished reciting, the Queen Mother nodded slightly. The wind and dust have faded away, and the fragrance of the flowers has faded away. I am tired of combing my hair every day and night. Good words, is this written for me? The women present were all stunned. Gao originally wanted to say that Su Buling wrote it to Mrs. Lu, but after thinking about it carefully, there seemed to be nothing wrong with writing this poem to the Queen Mother. Su Buling said that day that this poem was not written by Mrs. Liu. So the woman's eyes became strange. Mrs. Liu was about to explain, but when she heard the Queen Mother's words, her face suddenly turned ugly, as if the hairpin she had just picked out for her daughter had been packed away by an outsider. How could she bear it? She quickly said, "It's not for the Queen Mother." Many ladies fell silent, and the atmosphere suddenly became serious. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 47. After Mrs. Liu finished speaking, the hall where the Yingyingyans gathered on the observation deck suddenly became quiet. Jealousy is common among aristocratic families. All the ladies present came up step by step. How could they not hear that Mrs. Liu's tone was a bit rude? The one opposite is the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother just remembered that this niece-in-law had a similar experience to her. She had also been widowed for many years. She coughed slightly in embarrassment and said with a smile, "It turns out that Bulletin Ling wrote it for Hongluan. I had a different idea. I didn't realize that Bulletin Ling's literary talent was so outstanding." Mrs. Liu's expression was calm, but she was a little panicked in her heart. She thought for a moment, "Queen Mother, this poem was not written by Bulletin Ling. I asked him and he copied it." The Queen Mother frowned slightly. Whose copy was it? Mrs. Liu was speechless. Mrs. Liu liked this poem to the core of her heart, and the Queen Mother felt the same way, so why not? Seeing that Mrs. Liu's words did not match her words, the Queen Mother naturally thought wrongly, with a hint of resentment in her eyebrows. "I can still steal the words written by the juniors. I have been excellent at martial arts since childhood, but my literary talent is not outstanding, but I didn't expect that I still have a delicate heart with 7 orifices, so I can understand the thoughts of my elders." "Ha, yeah." Many ladies nodded. Whoever has a nephew who loves his aunt so much would probably feel warm in his heart. Mrs. Gao smiled and continued, "According to seniority, Prince Su should be called the Queen Mother. I heard that Prince Su has also arrived at Kujiangpan today. Why not call him over to reminisce about old times? If I can compose a poem for the Queen Mother." The Queen Mother's eyes lit up. She was obviously interested, and she turned to look at Mrs. Liu. Mrs. Liu naturally refused, and promised to come over and compose poems to gain publicity. If she couldn't compose poems, she would be disgraced. No matter what, she would not be able to gain favor. She frowned slightly and responded directly, "The poem is just a misinformation in the market. Besides, Ling is the crown prince of Prince Su. Madame Gao must not disturb the dignity of elders and younger ones." This sentence was a bit harsh. Gao's face froze and he quickly stopped talking. During the Shang and Zhou dynasties, there was no distinction between the prince and the prince. They were both titles for the prince. Later, when the world was unified and in order to respect the imperial power, the prince was one level lower than the prince, but he was also much higher than ordinary princes and concubines, not to mention those present. The wife of an official. The Queen Mother saw that Mrs. Liu's tone was so serious and that if she continued to speak, it would definitely hurt her harmony, so she chuckled twice and put down the teacup. Mrs. Gao is just joking. There are only female relatives present, so there is no reason to let Bulletin Ling come over and compose poems. Even if I really mean this, I should prepare a family dinner for another day. Please come to the palace to talk about it. Let's talk about this later." Mrs. Liu nodded and said nothing. After such an interruption, the gossip just now naturally could not continue. The Queen Mother didn't mention poetry anymore. After sitting for a while, she took the ladies out of the observation deck to relax. Mrs. Liu didn't like dealing with these utilitarian wives of officials. She said hello to the Queen Mother and said that she was tired and needed to rest for a while. She left the team alone and went to the waterside pavilion by the lake to find her treasure and go out to press it. Road. But as soon as Mrs. Lu and Yunu walked not far from the water pavilion, she looked up and her body suddenly stiffened. I saw a girl in furry clothes, sitting side by side with Su Buring on the edge of the waterside pavilion terrace, her legs dangling in the air, her embroidered shoes kicking up her skirt and swaying, a sweet smile on her face, talking to Su Buring. Snowflakes were sprinkled like catkins on the mirror-flat Kujiang pond. Su Buling was sitting with a fishing rod in his right hand and a wine bottle in his left hand, listening to the chatter beside him. My father loves me very much. As long as others dare to bully me, my father will definitely make the decision for me. There is also my father's student, the one who moved Chang'an with one sword a few years ago. His kung fu is better than yours, Prince Su. Now he is in charge of the imperial examination I am studying and traveling around the world. If he knew that I was being bullied, he would definitely make decisions for me. Song Yufu rubbed her little hands. It was too cold and she couldn't stand it. She quietly moved a little behind Su Buling, using Su Buling's body to block the wind. She kept saying that she had a big background and was not easy to mess with. Su Buling listened for a long time and tilted his head in a funny way. Miss Song, you brought such a large group of people out, who are you afraid of bullying you? Song Yufu pursed her lips, naturally not being able to speak openly, so she just whispered. No one bullies me. You're not threatening me, are you? No. Prince Su is knowledgeable, courteous, and has good conduct. How could he bully a woman? Even if I made a mistake unintentionally, you would still reason with me and not make things difficult for me like those vulgar people. Su Buling frowned slightly, and after thinking for a while, he originally wanted to put his hand on Song Yufu's forehead to see if he had a fever, but he gave up because of the precautions between men and women. In the 12th month of winter, sitting by the lake, the cold air came up from under my feet. Even Su Buling had to drink wine to keep warm. Although Song Yufu was wearing a coat and skirt and a shawl, it was obviously still very cold. She felt that she had not established a good relationship with Su Buling. I don't want to leave, so I endure it here. Su Buling saw that Song Yufu Dong was not speaking fluently, so he handed over the wine gourd in his hand. Would you like a bite? Song Yufu looked at the exquisite vermilion wine gourd, thought for a while, and said seriously. After drinking, do we become friends? Everyone in the world is like this. Su Buling was a little amused. There is indeed a saying, but usually between men, after a bowl of wine, they will become close friends in the future. Who said that? There are many female heroes in the world. They still value benevolence and righteousness and help their brothers. They are no worse than men. Song Yufu took the wine gourd with both hands, opened the cork, raised her head and took a sip, which was very chivalrous. It's a pity that Song Yufu had a very strict upbringing since she was a child. Even if she drinks alcohol, she only drinks ordinary rice wine and sake, which are similar to drinks. The Duaniasheo brewed by Sunji Apuza's secret method is considered a low-alcohol liquor, and people who don't know how to drink really can't handle it. Song Yufu took a sip of strong wine into her throat and choked, her face turned red and she almost spit it out. Her childhood upbringing prevented her from making such a rude move, and she swallowed it hard. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she couldn't speak. She patted her chest and coughed repeatedly. Cough cough cough. Ha ha. Su Buling smiled heartlessly and took the wine bottle back. Song Yufu's eyes were red. She felt uncomfortable and aggrieved by Su Buling's teasing, but she was not angry. She looked at Su Buling for a few times, then smiled too, then lowered her head and stopped talking. Su Buling laughed twice, and felt that bullying this silly girl was boring. San San stopped laughing and sat upright while holding the fishing rod. There was a moment of silence. Song Yufu's cheeks turned red, and she finally suppressed the drink. She raised her eyes and took a peek, and then said, "It doesn't matter, I don't blame Prince Su. Who apologized to you?" Su Buling glanced at Song Yufu, slightly confused. Prince Su must have been embarrassed just now and thought the joke was too much. It doesn't matter. Su Buling nodded, it seems you are not stupid. The two of them were just going back and forth like this, and they actually didn't know what they were talking about, but their relationship had become much closer due to Song Yufu's tireless strategy. Su Buling slowly told some jokes, turning from listening to talking. Just as he was talking, a voice suddenly came from behind the waterside pavilion. No. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 48. No. The voice was mature, the tone was very serious, and it seemed to have some other meaning. Although I don't know what it means, it definitely sounds like the oppressive power of a superior person to people's ears. This was the first time Su Buletinling heard such a tone. He instinctively sat upright and assumed a posture of sitting upright, just like a student who was called on by the teacher for deserting in class. Thinking about it, he felt something was wrong. Su Buling looked back, only to see Mrs. Lu wearing a waistcoat, her hands folded on her waist, and there was no expression on her charming face. She didn't know when she was standing behind her. Song Yufu shivered when she heard the voice, and hurriedly stood up from the edge of the terrace. Her legs were numb after sitting for too long, and she almost fell into the lake, exclaiming "Ah dash." Su Buling quickly raised his hand to support Song Yufu's arm and helped her up. Why are you so careless? Song Yufu was a little embarrassed and nodded at Su Buling. When this scene fell into Mrs. Lu's eyes, it was completely a scene of a talented man and a beautiful man loving his concubine. Mrs. Lu subconsciously stamped her embroidered shoes under her skirt. He pursed his lips as if he wanted to speak, but suppressed his words and just stood there staring at Su Buling. Song Yufu stood up straight, tightened her fiery red cloak tightly, and bowed. Mrs. Lu, I happen to be passing by. Prince Su hasn't been to the Imperial College for a few days. Come and have a look. Mrs. Lu looked Song Yufu up and down, but in the end she didn't say anything inappropriate and nodded slightly. Sorry, Miss Song. It's freezing. Be careful if you catch a cold. Go sit inside. Song Yufu was already very embarrassed when she was found sneaking in. She didn't dare to chat with Mrs. Lu about home affairs. If she was misunderstood that she wanted to be a princess, she would be in trouble. Immediately he bowed and bowed. Mrs. Lu, there is no need to be so polite. I just came to say hello and take my leave now. With that said, Song Yufu hurriedly walked through the corridor of the waterside pavilion. Madame Lu did not stop her and just smiled in return. Su Buling stuck the fishing rod on the edge of the waterside pavilion and stood up, looking at Mrs. Lu strangely. Aunt Lu, why are you in a bad mood? Mrs. Lu bit her lower lip. After Song Yufu disappeared, she walked slowly to Su Buling and said softly. No, what's the relationship between Miss Song and you? Just a classmate. Su Buling had a clear conscience, and indeed had nothing to hide. He chuckled and said, Song Yufu likes to meddle in other people's business. I forced her to copy the book a few times. She is considered an acquaintance. There is no other affection between our children. Aunt Lu Mo thinking wrongly. When Mrs. Lu heard this, her eyes showed a bit of anger, and she pondered for a moment, what are you talking about? Marriage between men and women is a business matter, and I didn't stop you. Why did I think wrongly? Su Buling blinked, spread his hands and smiled. Well, it's okay anyway, I'm afraid Aunt Lu will misunderstand. What did I misunderstand? I can't control you. Mrs. Lu put on her shawl and turned around, facing Kujiang Pond. She seemed tepid, but the faint resentment couldn't be suppressed. Su Buling secretly rubbed his forehead, put on a very friendly smile, walked up to hold Mrs. Lu's arm, and said in a gentle and easygoing voice. I know Aunt Lu is afraid that I will be deceived by a woman with ill intentions, and I will always remember it. Mrs. Lu looked around and saw that there was no one around, so she allowed Su Buling to support her and walk side by side along the corridor of the waterside pavilion. Because she was shorter than Su Buling, she looked like a little bird. No, you are about to reach the age of crown. The crown princess has not yet been chosen. The Xiao family's young lady is much younger than you. My niece has already been married. Several princesses are about the same age, but they are all concubines. Being born as a prince's concubine would be too much of a blessing for them. Song Baking's mentor has a great background, but after all, she was born into a poor family. Song Yufu is not qualified to be a concubine. Su Buletinling's head hurt when he heard this. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. When I marry a wife, I naturally marry the one I like. I don't care about these things. Nonsense. Madame Lu suddenly became serious, raised her head and gave Su Buling an angry look. I didn't say that I won't let you marry the one you like. You are a dignified vassal king who splits the land and borders. As long as you marry as many as you like, no one dares to say no, but it's true. There is only one concubine, just like the queen. There are too many forces involved. Do you think it is just a common man who marries a wife who only cooks and gives birth to babies? When she said milk child, Mrs. Lu felt that there was something wrong with the wording. She lowered her head and glanced at her chest, and calmly covered her mature figure with a shawl. Su Buling listened carefully and did not refute. I know, she's just a princess. I'll marry whomever Aunt Lu says. It's just a woman. I won't suffer any loss. Mrs. Lu felt a little weird when she heard this. Although there was nothing wrong, she was still a little unhappy. She frowned and thought for a while, then said, You still have to be nice to your wife, it's not easy for women. Su Buletinling nodded seriously, not wanting to talk nonsense about this nonsense, so he changed the topic. Aunt Lu, do you also like Xian Zizai's fragrance powder? As he said that, he got closer and smelled it. Mrs. Lu paused in her steps, something inexplicable flashed in her eyes, and she coughed lightly. I heard Yunu said it was very good, and all the officials and ladies in the capital like to use it, so I asked her to buy some back. It's just so, what do you think? Su Buling suddenly understood and chuckled. The fragrance is very good, but it is too light. It is more suitable for a girl like Song Yufu. Mrs. Lu's eyes darkened slightly. Do you think I am too old to be used appropriately? Suddenly faced with a proposition, Su Buling was caught off guard. His mind suddenly changed. He shook his head and chuckled. How could it be so? Just like peonies and lilies among flowers, each has its own advantages. Aunt Lu is the peony. It is graceful, luxurious, delicate, and charming, and is more suitable for perfume powder with a stronger fragrance. Mrs. Lu's face regained her gentleness, and she said softly, He is smooth-tongued, and he doesn't look like the prince of the feudal lord. I don't know who he learned it from, he knows a lot. Su Buring touched his nose and stopped talking nonsense. The two of them walked around the corridor before Mrs. Lu remembered the business. By the way, who did you write that poem about your relationship to? I didn't write it. If Aunt Lu likes it, it's for Aunt Lu. Mrs. Lu nodded, feeling relieved. She took out the handkerchief from her arms and looked at the poem embroidered on it. Just now, the Queen Mother thought it was written for her. Humph, it's not like she doesn't have a nephew. Xiaoting has been so popular recently, so she asked Xiaoting to write it for her. She also wanted to ask you to come over and write the lyrics. What a beautiful idea. The tone of this speech is really interesting. Su Buling wanted to laugh but didn't dare. Anyway, he felt itchy in his heart, so he said casually, Don't worry, Aunt Lu, I will never have anything to do with poetry in the future, and no one can tell me how to write it. Mrs. Lu hummed, put away her handkerchief, looked around a few times,
and then whispered. In a few days, if the Queen Mother summons you to the palace and talks about poetry, you will say that you can't write, but don't ask her to say 2 sentences before you agree. Su Buling thought for a while. Aunt Lu, has the Queen Mother provoked you? Mrs. Lu frowned slightly. She is a generation older than me. She entered the palace and became the Queen Mother. Xiaoting asked me to discipline you when you have something wrong. My surname is Lu and not Xiao. Why should I listen to her? Anyway, you don't listen to her. Su Buling pondered for a long time, but didn't understand what it was, so he had no choice but to nod. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 49. There was a boat parade by the Qujiang pool, and the procession of official ladies wandered around the beautiful lakeside for a long time. Time gradually passed noon, and it was time to return to the city. The Queen Mother stayed alone in the palace for 10 years. Due to her status, she could not be seen in public. She was not prestigious enough and could not listen to politics from behind the curtain like those powerful Queen Mothers in history. Even though she enjoyed the ultimate dignity and splendor in the world, she was just a poor person who stayed alone in her empty boudoir. After finally going out for a walk, the Queen Mother was a little reluctant to go back. Instead of boarding the royal chariot, she walked to Chang'an City with her nephew Xiaoting, talking about family gossip along the way. Everyone needs to communicate, just like Mrs. Lu, who does not have a son or a half, so she cherishes having a nephew by her side to tell the truth. The Queen Mother also has no children. As Xiao Chuiyang's sister, she almost regards Xiaoting as her own son. It's a pity that Xiaoting has no experience in Su Buling's reincarnation. He is just a bratty kid of 17 or 18, and his brain circuit is not very normal. Not to mention caring, thank God for not making the Queen Mother angry to death. On the stone path among the bamboo forest, the Queen Mother was walking slowly and dignifiedly in a gorgeous palace dress. A group of ladies from the official family could not leave the Queen Mother behind, and they all followed behind. Zhang Xiang was walking 10 steps away from the Queen Mother with his sword on his waist, and the wolf guards were stationed 5 steps apart. There was no chance of assassination in the surrounding area, and even hidden arrows were impossible to shoot. Xiaoting was swinging his jade-shaped fan in the winter, walking leisurely beside the Queen Mother. He looked quite handsome, but his expression was a bit unflattering. Auntie, my nephew and I have a different status in the world now. After I went to the Imperial Academy, all the masters and gentlemen were smiling. The Imperial students even gave me a thumbs up and called me Master Xiao when they saw me. Especially the Prince of Shu, who used to be you're laughing at me, I'm talking politely now. In just one sentence, the 4 words satisfied and contented are vividly displayed. The Queen Mother could not scold Xiaoting in front of outsiders, so she could only give her a faint glance. If you do business, the master will naturally appreciate you. The men of the Xiao family in my generation have always been sword-wearing, go to the palace, enter the court without following, and praise and worship without fame. It's normal. You're so complacent now, why don't you wait until you reach your father's position and ascend in the daytime? Xiaoting chuckled. I don't dare to think about it, I don't dare to think about it. Well, they praised me, and I said it was my aunt who taught me well. Finally, he said something humanly. The Queen Mother hummed softly. As she walked slowly, she thought of the observation deck just now. She looked back at Su Buling, who was chatting and laughing with Mrs. Lu in the queue behind her. By the way, I heard that a good poem was produced at the Dragon Poetry Conference a few days ago. Xiaoting's eyes lit up, he closed his folding fan and clapped his hands. Oh, so my aunt has heard about this? That's right, for the Dragon Poetry recital, I spent 3 days and 3 nights thinking hard and preparing, and wrote a song I Prime Minister's father.
The Queen Mother said with a bit of helplessness, "It's a masterpiece. How many jins and tails do you have? You don't know." Xiao Ting's face froze, he shut up angrily, thought carefully for a while, and then said seriously. That day at the Dragon Poetry Conference, there was a lot of unsightly dross, but after panning for gold in the sand, there was indeed a poem that stood out. The agar wood flowers in the wind have all gone, and I am tired of combing them away day and night. Comb your hair. What are you combing, you? Get out of here. The Queen Mother's face suddenly darkened, and those beautiful eyes seemed to want to kill someone. Shulun is the name for a brothel girl to receive a customer for the first time. When the Queen Mother heard this, she was naturally very angry. Even Zhang Xiang, the always serious and cold commander, coughed slightly and looked away, pretending that he didn't hear anything. Xiao Ting covered his mouth with a fan and said coquettishly, "That's all right, no, it's all those playboys like the Imperial College who made me remember it. Auntie, do you know who wrote this poem?" The Queen Mother frowned and her eyes widened. After enduring it for a long time, she finally did not scold and said coldly. "Written by Su Buletin. No." Xiao Ting looked back with a proud look for a few times, and then whispered, "Dragon Poetry Club, I asked Su Buling if he also bought poems, and he admitted it. I laughed at him, and he even beat me in anger." The Queen Mother was actually very confused and did not believe that this poem was written by Su Buling, who had developed limbs and a simple mind since childhood. After hearing Xiao Ting's words, she was dubious. "Are you sure Su Buling isn't lying to you?" Xiao Ting blinked and was a little dissatisfied. "I'm so smart, how could that barbarian Su Buling deceive me?" The Queen Mother pursed her red lips lightly, hesitated to speak, and finally nodded and stopped talking. Xiao Ting kept chattering beside him, which was considered to relieve the boredom of the elders. After walking on the stone path for a while, we gradually arrived at a place where the bamboo forest is relatively dense. The bamboos are evergreen all year round, and there is a thin layer of snow hanging on the bamboo leaves. It is as quiet as an ink painting. Just when the Queen Mother and Xiao Ting were chatting about their daily life, a soft click sound suddenly came from the quiet bamboo forest, as if the dry bamboo had been stepped on and cracked. The sound was inaudible and very far away. The Queen Mother and Xiao Ting didn't feel the inaudible movement at all. Zhang Xiang, however, had already placed his hand on the Yanling Dao and stopped on the stone road. The dozen or so wolf guards around him all turned their heads and looked at the source of the sound. The bamboo forest is so deep that you can't see what's going on inside. The Queen Mother noticed something was wrong from the wolf guard's reaction, looked around blankly, and asked, "Zhang Xiang, what's wrong?" Zhang Xiang looked respectful and raised his hand to salute. "There is a small beast in the forest. In order to prevent disturbing the Queen Mother, I would like to ask the Queen Mother to move back to the palace. I humbly go and have a look." The Queen Mother was also a little tired of shopping. She nodded slightly and the wolf guard carried the chariot over. When Xiao Ting heard that there was a little beast, he became interested. He followed Zhang Xiang with a fan and said, "Auntie, let me go over and take a look." The Queen Mother knew Zhang Xiang's martial arts, not to mention small beasts, even the Nian beast had to lie down when it came, so naturally she didn't worry and left with the palace maid. At the rear of the team, Su Buling was walking among a group of charming ladies. There were beaded and jade-like mountains and hills in front and behind him. It was not polite to look at anything. The key was that those young ladies and princesses of cardamom age deliberately moved towards him. There were not many people who took the opportunity to strike up a conversation. Due to the rules, he couldn't be too cold, and he was already a little overwhelmed. Seeing movement in the bamboo forest, Su Buling took advantage of the situation and said, "Aunt Lu, I'll go over there and take a look." Mrs. Lu, who was walking beside her, looked up and saw Zhang Xiang and Xiao Ting walking into the bamboo forest. She knew something might be strange and frowned.
Don't go there. Su Buling blinked, looking like he wanted to go out to play but had no choice. Mrs. Lu finally felt distressed and shook her head. That's all, be careful. I'll wait for you at the intersection. Don't play too long. Su Buletinling nodded lightly, took the reins of the horse from Yunu, then left the team and walked towards the depths of the bamboo forest. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 50. The bamboo sea is blue and white, with thousands of bamboos standing on the snow. The heavy snow bends the main trunk of the bamboo, like a full bough half hanging to the ground. The snow is falling, the bamboo forest is dense, and the light on the ground between the bamboo sea is relatively dim. Ning Qingyi, wearing a bamboo raincoat, stands quietly among the dense bamboo leaves with her embroidered shoes on two bamboos, with a black cloth covering her face, holding her breath and trying her best to cover the white mist of her breath. Several figures at the end of the field of vision approach from far away. Ning Qingyi narrowed his eyes slightly, clenched his right hand that was a little stiff from the cold, and the long sword hidden in the bamboo leaves made the bamboo leaves rustle slightly. The main purpose of sneaking into Longjian Pavilion last time was to snatch back the sword in his hand. The name of the sword is Shang Chun, which was the sword her mother used when she traveled in the rivers and lakes. More than 10 years ago, her mother traveled around the world and made friends with heroes like ordinary people in the rivers and lakes. It was unknown when her mother came to Chang'an City. She wanted to go to the small shop that sold the strongest wine in the world. As a result, she met a scholar squatting at the entrance of the alley to sell calligraphy. In order to sell a piece of calligraphy, he kept talking to her mother for half an hour. Later, the scholar failed the imperial examination repeatedly, and in anger, he wrote articles to curse the court, which caused a big trouble. Her mother didn't know why, so she ran to save the scholar, and the two of them wandered around together and became fugitives. Ning Qingyi only knew these things, and no one talked about the following things. She had met the nominal father several times, and each time he quarreled with her mother and left unhappily. 10 years ago, the mother and daughter who were hiding in the mountains of Shu were finally found in the Iron Eagle hunting deer. Her mother desperately sent her out, and then died under Zhang Xiang's knife. Compared with Zhang Xiang, Ning Qingyi hated the man who abandoned his wife and daughter more, because before her mother died, she wore the hairpin given by the man and buried her bones in the wilderness for 10 years, but she never saw the man come to pay tribute. Scratch. The sound of footsteps on the snow surface came from far away. Ning Qingyi came back to her senses, and her cold eyes became sharper. In any case, Zhang Xiang and the man must die. Today's opportunity is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we must seize it well. This time, she prepared in the bamboo forest for several days, and she remembered the position of each bamboo clearly. Just now, she deliberately made a small noise, and Zhang Xiang did as she thought, and asked the elite wolf guards to escort the queen mother away. Only Zhang Xiang and 2 wolf guards came. A 1-on-3 victory is not big, but the trap was buried in the snow in advance. In a 1-on-1 situation, she was confident that she could kill Zhang Xiang before he could react. Scratch. The 2 wolf guards with their goose feather knives unsheathed walked slowly under the bamboo forest back to back and looked up, but Ning Qingyi was well disguised and almost blended into the dense bamboo leaves, so he was not discovered. After the 2 wolf guards explored the way, Zhang Xiang, with his hand on his waist knife, walked over slowly, with a very steady breath, always paying attention to the surrounding movements. However, in this murderous environment, there was a discordant conversation. Su Buling, why did you follow me? I told you in advance that if you kill a good-looking little beast later, it will belong to me and I will give it to the Queen Mother. I just made the Queen Mother angry. The one who spoke was naturally the eldest son Xiao. Su Buling walked slowly with a long sword hanging from his waist. In order to pretend to be a young man from an aristocratic family who came to join in the fun, he was quite warm to Xiao Teng. What did you say to make the Queen Mother angry?
Xiaoting sighed, "It's all because of you. I remembered the poem Tired of Combing Hair at Night you wrote as combing hair, but I don't think there's any problem. Think about it, a depressed woman who is tired and bored at night and doesn't even have the energy to comb her hair must be lacking in sympathy. Just press her on the bed, ahem, I promise she won't make trouble, don't you think?" Su Buling frowned and thought for a while, then nodded. Xiaoting didn't expect Su Buling to agree with what he said. After a moment of hesitation, he looked like a fellow traveler, looked around a few times, and leaned in and whispered. "Su Buling, you have been in Chang'an for more than a year. Have you been to a brothel? Do you want me to take you?" Smash! The sword was 3 points out, showing a touch of cold light on the snow. Xiaoting quickly shut up. Zhang Xiang, who was walking in front, looked back, pondered for a moment, and said softly. "Su Shizi is very murderous. Young people with too much murderous aura will damage their minds. They should hide it appropriately. This is the experience summarized by masters of all generations. It is difficult for people with violent personalities to achieve great things. Those who are as still as a mountain, as calm as water, and as powerful as thunder are the best choices." Su Buling knew this truth a long time ago. He was just trying to scare people at the moment. He nodded slightly and put away his sword, saying casually, "How good is Lord Zhang's martial arts?" "Zhang Xiang is the most loyal guard of the current emperor. He was a dead man in his childhood and later entered the official career. He doesn't talk much." Hearing this, he thought. In the 8 wildernesses and 6 directions, those who can take my 3 swords are all well known in the case library, and they are considered to be masters. Xiaoting was quite interested in this and interrupted, "Does it mean that if you can fight Lord Zhang for 3 moves, you are considered a master?" Zhang Xiang nodded. Xiaoting's eyes lit up, and he opened his hands excitedly. "Su Buling, lend me your sword." Su Buling did not allow Zhang Xiang to refuse, and threw the sword out. Xiaoting took the long sword, pulled it out with great momentum, trotted forward in the wind and snow, and rushed towards Zhang Xiang. "Master Zhang, take the sword." Zhang Xiang was helpless, but the son of the prime minister of the dynasty asked him to fight, so he couldn't just say "you are worthy," so he could only symbolically raise the scabbard to fight. Su Buling's sword is the famous sword Zayadan, which is recorded in history books. It can cut iron like mud and cut hair. Ordinary iron can't block it at all. Zhang Xiang loves swords like crazy, so he naturally refuses to use the scabbard to block it. The scabbard in his hand is like sticking to the long sword, moving back and forth and sticking to the blade tightly. No matter how Xiaoting swings the sword, he can't touch Zhang Xiang at all, and there is not even a sound of metal hitting each other. The 2 wolf guards in front did not find anything unusual, and they relaxed their vigilance a little, looking back with interest. For Xiaoting, 3 moves means 3 hits, which will pass quickly, and Zhang Xiang also knows the mind of this nobleman, so he immediately picked up the long sword, raised his hand and clasped his fists with the knife, and prepared to say something polite. The action of holding the knife and clasping the fists is obviously not suitable for drawing the knife. At this moment, a sharp sword sound rang out in the blue and white bamboo sea. Shua! The bamboo leaves flew, like the rustling evening rain. Everyone looked up in shock, only to see a man and a sword descending from the sky above the bamboo sea. The cold light startled the wind and snow, and the sword energy moved the sky. This sword almost made the bamboo sea lose its color.